What makes Christianity different from other religions is that its purpose is to restore the one great world family which God had intended at the creation. This is to be accomplished by finding the true parents of mankind, through whom all men can become children of goodness through rebirth. This signifies that Christianity is the central religion that will accomplish the purpose of God's providence of restoration. Thus, the restoration of God's second blessing to men can be seen in the formation of one final worldwide cultural sphere centered on Christianity, in which all men will be elevated to the position of children of goodness centered on Christ and the Holy Spirit, who are the true parents of mankind. Thus, we cannot deny that we are entering the last days today. Next, we shall investigate how the history of the rise and fall of nations, having progressed toward the purpose of restoring the sovereignty of goodness, is leading the present age into the last days. It is an error brought about by ignorance of the fundamental providence of God to regard the cause of struggles and wars as merely the conflict of interest among different ideologies. Mankind has had a sinful history that began with the evil sovereignty centered on Satan, which was caused by the fall of the first human ancestors. Since God's purpose of creation is unchanging, the final goal of human history is the restoration of God's sovereignty of goodness, which is to be achieved through the separation of men from Satan. If the world of evil sovereignty were to go on without struggles and wars, this evil world would continue forever, leaving the sovereignty of goodness eternally unrestored. Therefore God has worked his providence of restoring the heavenly sovereignty by degrees, sending his prophets and saints. Evil sovereignties have been destroyed by better ones through the religions of goodness which God founded. Thus, struggles and wars have become the inevitable course through which man has had to go in order to fulfill the providence of restoration. A more detailed discussion of this question will be made in Part 2. Since human history is following the providential course of restoration through indemnity, evil may sometimes seem to prevail when seen within a limited time span, but in the end it will surely be destroyed, or absorbed and assimilated into the realm of a better standard. The rise and fall of nations by wars is thus the inevitable result brought about by the providential course for the restoration of the sovereignty of goodness. This is why God ordered the Israelites to destroy the 7 tribes of Canaan. When Saul disobeyed him, leaving some of the Amalekites alive with their cattle, God severely punished him. 1 Samuel 15:18-23. Thus, God not only directly ordered the Israelites to destroy the Gentiles, but even destroyed the Israelites of the northern dynasty when they turned to evil by delivering them into the hands of the Assyrians. 2 Kings 17:23. We must understand that God did so in order to destroy the sovereignty of evil and restore the sovereignty of goodness. Therefore, struggles and fights between individuals of God's side are evil, because they result in the destruction of the good sovereignty itself. But for the good sovereignty to destroy the evil sovereignty is an act of goodness, because it is to fulfill the purpose of God's providence of restoration. In this manner, the history of the struggle for separating sovereignty from Satan by gradually gaining lands and wealth all over the world has practically come to restore the heavenly sovereignty. As for men, they are being restored to the heavenly side on a worldwide basis by going through the individual level, family level, society level, and national level. Thus, the providence for the separation of men from Satan, starting from the age of clan society and going through the ages of feudalism and monarchism, has now come into the age of democracy. In present human society, we see the division into the 2 worlds of democracy and communism, the former being the ideology to establish heavenly sovereignty, and the latter being that to establish the satanic one. In this way, human history, which started under the evil sovereignty centered on Satan, has now come to form 2 opposing sovereignties on a worldwide basis. As the original human nature, heading for ultimate goodness, is awakened through religion, philosophy, and ethics, it produces the separation of the power of the good sovereignty from that of the evil one. These 2 sovereignties, with opposing purposes, can never coexist. Upon the consummation of human history, they will surely arrive at the point of intersection, causing a conflict of an internal nature centering on ideology, which may very possibly cause an external war centered on military power. Then, finally, the sovereignty of Satan will perish forever, leaving the sovereignty of God restored as the everlasting single sovereignty of heaven. Today is the last days, because it is the time of intersection, when the world of good sovereignty under God and the world of evil sovereignty under Satan are confronting each other in the final battle. In human history, which has hitherto separated the good sovereignty from the evil one, the evil sovereignty sinks down to destruction, while the good sovereignty rises toward prosperity. Just as in muddy water the mud sinks down, while the clear water rises upward. Thus in the last days these two sovereignties of good and evil will, for a period, meet at the point of intersection. The former will remain forever as gods, while the latter will perish in eternal darkness. Thus, when these two sovereignties of good and evil are at the point of intersection, it is called the last days, since this is the time when the perfection of the growth stage, from which Adam and Eve fell, should be restored by indemnity. All mankind wanders about in ideological chaos, just as the first human ancestors in the Garden of Eden were confused without knowing what to do after the fall. During the long course of the providence of restoration, there have been several occurrences of the last days in which the two sovereignties of good and evil came to the point of intersection. Both the time of Noah and that of Jesus were called last days, with the two sovereignties at the point of intersection. But each time men failed to accomplish their portion of responsibility and were unable to destroy the sovereignty of evil, and God again had to start his providence for the separation of the good and the evil sovereignty. Consequently, we will see another intersection of the two sovereignties at the time of the second advent of the Lord. The course of the providence restoration has thus repeated periodically the spiral movement of affairs going through the circular course toward the purpose of creation. This is why there have been many periods of similar nature in human history. 3. The phenomenon of the restoration of the third blessing. God's third blessing to man signifies Adam and Eve's dominion over the world of creation after they attain perfection. Man's dominion over the world of creation has two aspects, internal and external. We can see that in the present age, the two aspects of man's dominion, lost with the human fall, are being restored. Internal dominion means the dominion of heart and zeal. When a man has perfected his individuality, he becomes one in heart and zeal with God. Thus he is able to experience God's own heart and zeal. On the day when man, after having perfected himself, comes to love the world of creation with heart and zeal identical to God's, and when he receives the beauty returned by the creation, he becomes the dominator in heart and zeal over the world of creation. However, due to the fall, man failed to experience God's heart and zeal, and has not been able to regard the creation with God's heart and zeal. Nonetheless, God has been working his providence of restoration by means of religion, philosophy, and ethics, constantly elevating by degrees the spiritual standard of fallen men toward God. Thus, man in the present age is restoring his qualification as the dominator in heart and zeal over the world of creation. External dominion means domination through science. If man, having perfected himself, had been able to dominate the world of creation internally, with heart and zeal identical to that which God had over the world of creation at the time of its creation, man's scientific achievement could have reached its culmination in an extremely short time, because man's spiritual sensibility would have been developed to the highest dimension. Thus, men could have dominated externally all the things of creation. In consequence, man not only could have subdued the world of nature, including the heavenly bodies, at the earliest possible date, but he also could have brought about an extremely comfortable living environment due to the economic development that would have accompanied scientific achievement. However, man, by losing his spiritual light due to the fall, and by thus being deprived of his internal domination over the things of creation, fell to the status of a barbarian, with a spiritual sensibility as dull as that of the animals. Thus, he lost the external domination over creation. Man, according to God's providence of restoration, now has restored his spiritual light. Consequently, both his internal and external dominations have, by degrees, been restored. Therefore, scientific development in the present day has also reached its highest degree. So it has come about that modern men have created an extremely comfortable living environment due to economic developments which followed brilliant scientific achievements. We see then that God's third blessing to men is being restored, and from this we cannot deny that today we have reached the last days. As we have observed repeatedly, the development of the cultural spheres also shows that a worldwide cultural sphere is now being formed centered on one religion. Nations, too, are moving toward one worldwide structure of sovereignty, starting from the League of Nations through the United Nations and reaching today for world government. Regarding economic development, the world is now on the threshold of forming one common market. Extremely well-developed transportation and communication facilities have reduced the limitations of time and space. Men are able to communicate with one another on the earth as easily as if the earth were the garden of a house in which people of all the different races of the East and West lived as one family. All mankind is crying out for brotherly love. However, a home is formed around the parents. There alone can true brotherly love occur. Therefore, upon the second advent of the Lord as the true parent of mankind, all men will come to live harmoniously in the garden as one family. From this, too, we may know that today is surely the last days. There must be one final gift which history, having thus progressed, is about to present to mankind. This must be the ideology of the macrocosmic nature that can bind all the strangers who now live in turmoil within one world without any true purpose into one family centered on the same parents.